From sexy fish vampires to flesh-eating shadows, there is no denying that the Doctor has encountered some truly incredible creatures in Doctor Who. And while it is always exciting to see which new creature will be appearing each week, it's equally just as exciting and also very moving when we see the Doctor and particularly the companions encounter real-life historical figures. Well, with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with Who Culture, here with the 10 best historical figures who have appeared in NuWho. Number 10, Madame de Pompadour. Now, Series 2's The Girl in the Fireplace is a perfect example of the Doctor accidentally stumbling into history when he somehow manages to place himself into the life of a young Renette Poisson. Now, it is really entertaining when you see the Doctor suddenly discover that he's just encountered someone significant, and of course this episode adds that extra layer of comedy by him only realising that after he's just snogged her. Although there is no written rule, it is a common known law in the Doctor Who universe that history is not to be tampered with, and accidentally becoming the love obsession of the future mistress to the King of France just seems a little bit risky on the course of history. His unintentional intrusion actually eliminates a far greater threat on the timeline of Madame de Pompadour, and it means that the Doctor can do what he does best, which is stop the baddies from destroying history. Now, Doctor Who has a really clever way of being both entertaining but also educational, and those windows into the different stages of Madame de Pompadour's life mean that this episode not only calls for an epic shot of the Doctor smashing through a mirror on horseback, but it also offers an almost accurate biography on Madame de Pompadour's life. Number 9, William Shakespeare. Even when the Doctor just simply intends to impress his new companion with a quick trip to the past, he somehow manages to sniff out trouble. While meeting Shakespeare wasn't a complete accident, fighting off the Carrionites definitely wasn't part of the original plan. Now, what's really interesting about this episode is that the Doctor and Martha use their knowledge of history to figure out that something's not right. The works of Shakespeare are famous throughout the world, throughout history, so when there's a random play that doesn't exist in the future, that obviously raises some questions. Also interesting about this episode is the subtle touches upon a long-standing myth that Shakespeare was actually bisexual. Now, they explore this through his attitudes towards both Martha and the Doctor, and even the Doctor remarks that 57 academics just punched the air in response to his flirtatious remarks towards him. It is sometimes easy to forget that this is simply a fictional answer to a real-life mystery, and yet somehow you still feel like you're satisfied regardless. As it so happens, Shakespeare isn't the only historical figure to appear in this episode, but we'll get to that one later. Number 8, Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was the first historical figure to appear in the 2005 reboot. We'd already seen the Doctor and Rose travel literally to the end of the world, but this was the first time that Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor ventured into the past. Now, like the Shakespeare Code had a fitting theme for its titular playwright, The Unquiet Dead aptly followed the most appropriate Dickens theme of ghosts. But while we're still on the subject of Shakespeare, one of the clever adjustments that Mark Gatiss made to the script here is taking the common phrase of what the Dickens, but having Charles Dickens himself say what the Shakespeare. And it's just simple changes like this that make these characters seem so much more realistic, even though there are ghosts and zombies and a possessed maid. But it is Doctor Who, so you have to have a little bit of leeway. Charles Dickens did then reappear in The Wedding of River's Song, but this time his purpose was to highlight the displacement of time, having Charles Dickens sat on BBC News talking about his new book about ghosts and Christmas and the past and the present and the future. But the story of A Christmas Carol is so appropriate and fitting for that episode, which is essentially the Doctor and River getting their glimpse at Christmas future if they didn't fix the paradox, showing them what could happen if they didn't change things. Number 7, Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla appeared in the Series 12 episode Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, and this episode really put a focus on how the success and significance of these historical figures could attract the attention of other alien races throughout time and space. Now, in this instance, it was the Queen of Scythera who had sought out the engineering genius of Nikola Tesla to help fix her ship. But probably more significant in this episode is the exploration of the rivalry between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison and the reality of his legacy. Now, obviously, the real Nikola Tesla didn't fight aliens, but he did dedicate his life to a vision that was never truly realized or appreciated in his lifetime. And the hope and optimism that's portrayed by actor Goran Visnich, I think that's how you say his name. It's a very hard name to say, but the hope and optimism that he portrays just makes it so much more heartbreaking when we as an audience know that he never got the recognition that he deserved. And actually, this is emulated in Yaz's disappointment that his heroic efforts within this episode had no positive impact on his future. And this man fundamentally changed the way we live and yet never knew how successful he actually was in his endeavors. Now, also the casting here of Goran Visnich was absolutely perfect because Nikola Tesla, who, although Serbian by blood, was actually born and raised in what would become Croatia, which is where Goran Visnich is also from. And it's just little attentions to detail like this that just show how much research and effort went into telling this historical story. Number 6, Winston Churchill. When Winston Churchill made his on-screen debut in Series 5's Victory of the Daleks, he seemed to already have an established acquaintance and friendship with the Doctor. Now, while this was the first time we'd seen it on screen, there are several publications documenting encounters between the pair dating back to 1986. Now, because of this pre-existing relationship, it meant that this episode could explore a completely different dynamic between the Doctor and a historical figure. Rather than being fearful or showing disbelief, Winston Churchill kind of had the confidence here to utilise his friend and try and gain the upper hand, use his foreknowledge of the future and history to try and win the Second World War faster. Now, of course, the Doctor maintains that there are certain points in history that have to be fixed and cannot be interfered with. Apparently, the Daleks didn't get that memo. Winston Churchill appeared a few more times throughout Series 5 and 6, first to just emphasise the vast number of people who are connected to and rely on the Doctor in the Pandorica Opens, and then again alongside Charles Dickens in The Wedding of River Song to just highlight that topsy-turvy displacement of time. Now, the inclusion of Winston Churchill here and Hitler in Let's Kill Hitler managed to educate the targeted younger audience on those significant figures during World War II without branching into anything more sinister or unsuitable for the younger audience. Just highlighting that there is a history lesson here, but it's also for children and entertaining at the same time. Number 5, Queen Victoria. Tooth and Claw is an episode that really upped the fear factor of Doctor Who. You have the ninja monks, the lycanthropic possession, and of course the alien werewolf. And Queen Victoria's presence only really adds to that serious tone of the episode. Unlike most people who encounter the Doctor, she really doesn't appreciate his daredevil energy, and she really doesn't appreciate Rose's immature attempts to get her to say, "We are not amused." Now, while she does honour them for saving her life, she's also very eager to eliminate this threat on her empire. So much so that the events of this episode actually result in Queen Victoria establishing the Torchwood Institute to protect the Earth not only from aliens, but also primarily from the Doctor himself. Now, this episode is also a really good example of the Doctor Who creatives giving a supernatural explanation for a real-life mystery. And in this instance, it's the suggestion that Prince Albert's obsession with having the Koh-i-Noor diamond recut and resized is because he knew of the existence of this werewolf and was going to use the diamond as a tool to destroy it. It also offers a rather ambiguous question surrounding the real-life blood condition that Queen Victoria suffered from, suggesting that it was actually the result of being bitten by a werewolf, with the Doctor saying that this unexplained haemophilia diagnosis was actually just a Victorian euphemism for lycanthropic mutation. Number 4, Rosa Parks. Series 11's episode Rosa explored a different side to the Doctor's moral compass. Of course, it didn't come without its hardship and heartbreak, but it really was a poignant predicament to portray. So often we see the Doctor helping historical figures to overcome obstacles or alien anomalies in their timeline, but in this instance, the obstacle was 100% human and yet integral to the progression of humanity. What started as simply an effort to stop the time-traveling criminal Krasko from preventing the Montgomery bus boycott led to the Doctor, Yaz, Ryan and Graham becoming vital parts in Rosa Parks' story. And that moment where they are forced to stay seated on the bus in order to ensure that Rosa Parks gets arrested is one of those rare occasions where the Doctor has to allow or even cause something awful to happen in order to maintain the future. Now, of course, we have seen other moments of moral questioning in Doctor Who in episodes such as the fires of Pompeii and the waters of Mars, moments where the Doctor really must adhere to those laws of a fixed point in time and use that as their justification for not helping. Number 3, Agatha Christie. The Unicorn and the Wasp is another example of the Doctor Who creatives offering a timey-wimey explanation for a real-life historical mystery. And in this instance, it offers an explanation to the 10-day disappearance of Agatha Christie in 1926. The episode plays out in the style of an Agatha Christie murder mystery, which subsequently turns out to be more than just a coincidence. Lady Edison, a big fan of Agatha Christie's novels, had unknowingly filled the mind of her long-lost son with the notion of murder mysteries through a necklace which linked the pair telepathically. The power of Agatha Christie's writings was so strong that they became embedded within the psyche of this newly transformed Vesper form, alongside his true identity, and resulted in his fictional misconception of the world. Agatha determines that the only way to stop the giant wasp-like creature from killing people was to lure it away and drown it by throwing the telepathic necklace into Silent Pool Lake. But her own connection to the jewel and the Vesper form resulted in her losing consciousness and being taken to a hotel by the Doctor and Donna, waking up 10 days later with total amnesia about the events. Now, of course, the real explanation as to the amnesia and the disappearance is still a mystery, but we have here an example of Doctor Who creatives going, you know what, I'm going to put my own supernatural spin on this story. Number 2, Elizabeth I. When Elizabeth I entered the Globe Theatre in the Shakespeare Code, she was not only aware of who the Doctor was, but she seemed to be extremely agitated by his presence. Now, at the time, both the Doctor and the audience were very confused about why she hated him so much. And in the subsequent series, between then and 2013's The Day of the Doctor, there were several hints made that the Doctor was actually married to Elizabeth I. He boasts about his nuptials to Ood Sigma in The End of Time. Liz 10 teases him about his less than virtuous activities with the so-called Virgin Queen in The Beast Below, and he mentions in The Wedding of River Song that Elizabeth I is still waiting on a glade to elope with him. Now, the events of The Day of the Doctor would eventually confirm these boastful remarks to be the truth. The proposal was supposed to just unveil a Zygon, but he unintentionally became the fiancé to Elizabeth I, and he did fulfill his promise in a private ceremony witnessed by the 11th Doctor, the War Doctor, and Clara Oswald as well. He then promised that he would be right back. Judging by her animosity towards him almost 40 years later, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he did not come right back. Number 1, Vincent van Gogh. Vincent and the Doctor is equally one of the most heartbreaking and heartwarming episodes of the Matt Smith era. Now, unlike most encounters with historical figures, the Doctor purposely sought out Vincent rather than just stumbling across him. Now, similarly to sensing trouble when Shakespeare mentions a play that doesn't exist in the future, the Doctor and Amy notice a suspicious creature lurking in the background of one of his paintings that shouldn't be there. Now, the exploration of Vincent's depression in this episode is particularly beautiful. Rather than suggest that the Crofeus creature is the cause of Vincent's troubled life, it instead suggests that his alternative views on life are what give him the power to see things that others can't. The whole premise of the storyline is just this beautiful metaphor for the inner demons of depression and how they very much do exist, despite the fact that they appear invisible or non-existent to the naked eye. It even goes as far as to explore how people trying to help can make the day that much better, but can also make it much worse. And this is one of those very rare occasions where the Doctor actually breaks his own rules and shows Vincent his future legacy. That moment where Bill Nighy is delivering his beautiful monologue about the importance of Van Gogh's work, and Vincent himself is standing there becoming completely overwhelmed by what he's hearing and what he's seeing, is arguably one of the most beautiful and greatest scenes in Doctor Who. And that concludes our list. Obviously, we couldn't cover every historical figure that has appeared in Doctor Who since 2005. But if you think we've missed one that's really important, then do let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Make sure you head over to Twitter and follow us there at Who Culture, and Instagram as well. And I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.